So, I mean, as in continuation with what you had said, sir, with respect to heterodox economics in India and how it bloomed and blossomed, um, you had in your book mentioned that Dadabhai Naroji had a precursor, oh, sorry, was a precursor to Keynes in terms of conceptualizing the idea of effective demand. Um, my question is effective demand essentially an orthodox idea? Is it more of an orthodox idea than that of an heterodox idea, historically speaking, from your classical period to X? I think the definition offered by Mr. Kaletsky is slightly different from the definition offered by Keynes in the effective demand category. Post-Keynesian definition is very different.
Okay, so also one, I mean, I don't think that I would have said that Nauroji had an idea of effective demand before Keynes, and I don't think that's quite true. Now, if you take again, when you think of effective demand, we think of it as a heterodox concept because the mainstream counterpart to it is the Say's law, which states
Yep.
that supply creates its own demand, and that's there
Yes.
in various kinds of formulations. And people like Keynes and Kaletsky were questioning that notion of Say's law, and they developed the principle of effective demand. Now, this kind of idea, I mean, I think that it is certainly a novelty in terms of economic theory is concerned. Although, if you go back, and I've done this, I mean, many of my papers, I've engaged with this question in the work of classical political economists, but you find some understanding of the problems of aggregate demand deficiency, not in the same way as Keynes articulated it, but in their own conceptual frameworks in the work of classical political economists, especially Malthus,
Okay.
Sismondi,
Jean
and
Charles.
also variants in Marx. So, and even before, some aspects in Kenne, some in Cantillon. So it's there in the literature, in the discourse, but the formulation of Keynes and Kerensky has been, I think, very effective as a counterpart to Say's law. And then people within the Indian context, and I would think that who were writing in the 1930s, like P.J. Thomas, who was from the south of India, he was exposed to it and he tried to write about its application to the Indian context. But then, when more people started to apply Keynes to the Indian context, an Indian economist, A.K. Dasgupta, has written a piece in the Economic and Political Weekly saying that one needs to really see if Keynes's principle of effective demand is applicable in the Indian economy where markets are not fully developed. In other words, when demand increases, can supply adapt to it,
Adapt to it.
sort of effortlessly? So people, even within India, have brought up different aspects to the question and then try to apply to the Indian context in various ways.
Interesting. Interesting. And I would like to now transition to the institutional side of things in your book. But before that, I would like to ask, I mean, how is institutional economics approached in India? I mean, both at the policymaking apparatus and academically as well. I think here you have classical political economy on one hand and the orthodoxy on another, right? So what about this in between, but a crucial nonetheless?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I don't know very well how it is approached in the Indian context, but maybe
Or
what I
what level of
can
influence does it have? Like,
say about it is, I'm not sure, but although when we think of institutional economics, the name that is associated commonly with institutional economics is the name of Veblen.
of course.
Thorstein Veblen, and people know the idea of conspicuous consumption and the theory of the leisure class.
And
Uh, there are also economists like Galbraith, John Kenneth Galbraith,
Galbraith,
who's about the power in economic society, big
yes.
corporations. He's written about money.
He had
Um,
coined the term conventional wisdom. I believe. I mean, I
Maybe, but
read.
I
Yes.
okay,
Go ahead.
okay. So now, but institutional economics earlier used to be much more there in the syllabi, economic
Mm.
syllabi, but I think that now not so much. But having said that, there's also a kind of mainstream interpretation or take on institutional economics, which is called new institutional
Again,
economics.
yes.
And new institutional economics, the main sort of figure there would be Ronald Coase.
Hmm.
And Coase has it's his work on property rights, how property rights are assigned,
Indeed.
which is tied to the mainstream, theory of
Hmm.
prices, cost minimization, utility
And
maximization, that kind of framework. Now, that has led to a large literature. And in fact, if you ask me, I would think that in Indian curriculum, it is likely, uh, I would hypothesize that it's likely know more about new institutional economics, substantively speaking,
yes.
than old institutional economics like Veblen and
Well,
Galbraith.
I can attest to this because we learn about coercion property rights in our environmental economics classes. So it's part of the career, as you rightly said. So nice. And in referencing your book, can the principle of historical specificity, this is my interpretation of it, from the institutional economic side, can the principle of historical specificity apply to economic concepts as well? Why did certain economic concepts come about in the first place? Why did these tools come about in the first place? The origins, the root causes of why they are the way they are, and what is the reason for their existence? Uh,
Mm. Okay, so
if you can just
I
explain
would,
historical specificity to the audience here.
yeah, yeah. So I would, the answer to that question, I think, is both yes and no.
Hmm.
So let me try to first, explore why it could be yes, that all economic concepts are born out of certain institutional conditions.
Yes, sir.
Now, um, if one, looks at one way of looking at it is that in capitalism, if we think of capitalism as a specific epoch or a specific institutional arrangement, then we can think of several, notions of competition, uh, profit maximization, some kind of consumer as the king, some notion of rationality, some notion of cost benefit analysis, all of these as operating mostly within the realm of the idea of capitalism.
Hmm.
But if you take a look at, let's say, prices, just as a concept, commodities have prices. You find discussion of prices in non-capitalist, pre-capitalist
Yes.
societies too. So, for instance, if you take a look at Kautilya's Arthashastra, there is a discussion on prices.
Hmm.
Or if you take a look at Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah, there is a discussion on prices. Now, they are not talking about capitalist societies, but they're talking about a concept of prices which, the meaning is similar, but it's not that there is a theoretical framework of competition in the same way as we understand it today.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Right? So, in one sense, it's true that historical specificity matters, but then when you talk of historical specificity, we need to also figure out which level of historical specificity.
Specificity. Okay.
Are we talking at the level of capitalism?
Hmm.
Are we talking at the level of, let's say, colonial economies, post-colonial economies,
Hmm.
people, colonies versus
Hmm.
people who have been colonial oppressors?
Yes.
Are we talking about, what today people might call global South and global North? And even within the Indian context, right? There's
Yes.
so much of regional variation.
Questions of, yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah, so
complexities.
again, there are, I think that there are various levels of historical specificities,
Specificities.
and it is not necessary that at all levels you can have a kind of theorizing that is possible.
Possible.
So
Okay.
I think, yeah, so that's one. But
Interesting.
then, so let's say something like in after Srafa's work and people who worked on it, called the surplus approach.
Yes, sir.
Right? Now, all that it means is that in any society, we produce more than what is necessary for subsistence.
Indeed.
So now, even, I mean, one can sort of speculate that any society might want to store a little up for future consumption.
Hmm.
Um, some kind of storage is possible. So, for instance, something like the idea of the surplus might be a little common across many
Hmm.
historical events or historical epochs. It's
Yes.
possible to contemplate that.
Hmm.
But of course, how the surplus is distributed,
You did.
right? Yeah, whether it is based on your marginal productivity theory of income distribution, is it based on who has more power in the society? Is it based on kinship? Is it just based on
Kinship.
familiarity, kinship, or is it just, so if I'm part of a tribe, I have some ethical ways of distributing that surplus. So there are
Yes.
different ways of distributing the surplus, which is probably specific to a community, specific, maybe even that community lives within a historical
Sort of.
epoch, but they might still
Yes.
have different rules.
Interesting. So I think so. I think it's a great answer. I think it covers the many layers of historical specificity as a tool. Um, uh, I would like to actually shed light on your chapter. So, I mean, as it's very important to us students in your understanding of the two main sort of approaches in the academic pedagogy today that you've written about. Could you expand on that, please?
Yeah, so most of my writing and maybe public
In the book, like,
engagements
yeah.
and teaching, yeah, and specifically in the book, well, the talking about the edited volume, Pluralistic Economics and its History, I think that mostly in that, at least the chapter that I have written, and in the partly in the introduction, um, the main division would be between mainstream marginalist economics and, let's say, alternative classical political economy, or post-Keynesian economics. That would be the main kind of division. And most people are familiar with marginalist economics because that's what we are taught in schools and colleges.
Throughout, yeah.
So you have the rational individual, you have some notion of Say's law, you think in terms of the individual, not in terms of groups.
Groups, yeah.
You think in terms of supply and demand functions. We study calculus
This
to
differential
operationalize
equation.
the ideas. So these are some of the more common features of that.
Hmm.
And in, let's say, in classical political economy, they operate on social classes.
Hmm.
So power is sort of entrenched and inbuilt into that basic foundational building block of the theory. They reject any notion of Say's law, and also, I mean, in this kind of alternate approach, even when there is competition, where profit maximization happens within this kind of a society, the tendency is for unemployment of labor. Whereas
Yes.
in the mainstream marginalist economics, the tendency is for full employment of labor.
Yes.
So that also means that you then have different policy responses to
To
how
the
these two schools of thought address contemporary problems of employment.
with respect to political economy, you've written a lot about that in the book as well. But a general question that I would like to sort of ask you is, in the current Indian sort of academic diaspora, how do people view political economy beyond the likes of your David Ricardos and your Adam Smiths? I mean, the popular names. Because I think political economy also has an underside, or let's say a left field sort of faction to it as well, right? A little more under discussed, if I may use the term. Um, are they aware? Is there? I mean, for Cantillon and the Quene for that matter, even Tableau Economique and how does the current Indian academic diaspora view these kinds of people? Because I think with Safa and Marx is relatively popular, right? And this now and Marx is also discussed in politics as well. But these people are purely um, within the canon of economics, if I may phrase it though. So
Yeah, so I think that you're probably right in saying that Marx is certainly much more discussed and read, maybe more
And
so in non-economics disciplines, but certainly very much in India. Srafa, I think, is relatively very little, I think, studied and engaged with, except maybe in some institutions. That would be the sense that I have. And now Smith and Ricardo, I mean, people know,
yeah,
but it might not be the case that people have studied their texts and their ideas closely,
okay.
and even less so people like Cantillon and Kenney who are writing before Adam
Mhm.
Smith. And I think this is, I mean, it's partly because people have this idea of what is new is most probably correct. So why should I read something that is written in
Yes.
1700 or
Yes.
1800 or 1900? Because what is it that they can say about the world that is relevant now?
Mhm.
Right. So I think that maybe partly it is to do with that, but
Yes.
it's very clear anybody who studies ideas
Yes.
and the history of ideas, it's very clear that there is nothing to say
Mhm.
that the ideas today are necessarily more correct and more better, more explanatory than yesterday's ideas,
Ideas, yeah.
because the criteria that we use to sort of assess these ideas also change.
Hmm.
And we need to maybe engage more with philosophy of science, philosophy of social science,
Yes.
history of economics to
Next.
actually have a um, better answer to this question.
Chosen. I think, yeah, I mean, as a natural follow-up to that, do you think in India specifically, is the lack of pluralistic economics in the country a result of an invisible lobbying group that is, propping up orthodoxy, or is it just pure ignorance? Because in America, there is a lobbying group. There is a clear lobbying group. But in India, I am not too sure if there is one. Uh,
So I think that yeah, it's well, this is, I mean, I'm not, I mean, I've not really tried to look at what might be the factors that are resulting in this situation as much as trying to
hmm,
write on why we should change the situation.
yes.
Uh, but having said that, since you're asking this question and I'm sort of thinking, it is, I mean, I think one of the answers is that, I mean, people who, when we look at curriculum in India, for instance,
Hmm,
uh, many a times, at least, let's say what we consider as the top schools in India, they look at what's happening in the top schools in the US
hmm,
or earlier in UK, and the curricula is sort of taken from there. Now, until about the 1960s, 70s, history of economic thought was a compulsory course for PhD students in across the world, right? So in the US,
hmm,
and therefore it was also, I think people were much more aware of the history of the discipline. People who were trained to be economists, trained as in to people who have done their PhDs, were aware of this.
hmm,
But today, when you look at PhD programs in the US, history of economic thought is not a compulsory course, and therefore, when you look at PhD programs in India, in so the top places, you would find that it's not anymore a compulsory course. So, little bit is because of the incentive structure of the economics discipline, and the
yes.
idea that, for instance, there are considered top journals.
Yes.
um, but then suppose you work on economic history, history of economic thought, or you work on ethnographic work, it is almost impossible for you to publish in any of those top
Those
journals because
within quotes, respected and reviewed. Yeah.
yes, I mean, the core, and because anyway, the
Yeah.
rankings, whether it is of institutions or journals, that's a different game altogether.
Yes.
But I think that we need to, I mean, as one would say, understand the sociology of the economics
Uh,
discipline.
yes.
itself, like what are the incentive structures for people to publish, for people to
Yes.
get promoted,
Yes, sir.
how a curriculum are framed. And then I think that we might be able to find some sort of a answer.
Answer. Amazing. And in your opinion, is uh, right now, I mean, this is again in reference to book, but I think this is a general question as well. I mean, my own interpretation. This is in the history of econometrics, and I have econometrics as a subject, and I'm not too good at it. I'll be frank with you. But in the book, I think it's written that Keynes did not approve of econometrics to sort of aid in the process of economics, and in the academic sort of process of it, and its sort of various variations and stuff. But my question is, even within the orthodoxy, there seems to be a palpable disagreement between the kind of methods that should be used, the kind of method that isn't used. Now, a second-year undergraduate like myself wouldn't have been aware of the fact that Keynes disapproved of econometrics, right? So, and we are learning new Keynesian theory. So, how is it that they're able to sort of, internally come to a consensus and sort of figure it out amongst themselves, and they perpetuate the orthodoxy in a mathematically oriented new Keynesian setup, even though there is disagreement, there is discordance within themselves. So, I mean, if you could
Yeah,
just
so one thing to clarify is that new Keynesian economics is neither new, neither is it Keynesian.
yes, but no, as a
Uh,
response to classical, new classical, right? So
well, similarly, I would say new classical is neither new nor is it
new,
classical.
yes,
By classical, I'm referring to the economics of Smith Ricardo,
yeah, yeah.
particularly. Now, so I think that naturally among students, and I think as a student too, I mean, it's a little confusing because new Keynesian is there.
Hello.
Who are studying similarities between different schools of thought would certainly, I would
So just
put both
once,
new Keynesian economics and new classical
yes.
economics.
So my internet
Yeah.
connection just it messed up a little bit. If you could just rewind 30 seconds. Yeah,
Yeah. So I was saying that there's nothing new about
new
new or
Keynesian.
Keynesian
Yeah,
about Keynesian economics. Similarly, nothing new or classical about new classical economics. Classical understood in the economics of Smith and Ricardo. Now, the best way to think of new classical and new Keynesian is to think of them as mainstream marginalist macroeconomics with some variance
this
in
is
that. So the way to see differences between, let's say, post-Keynesian economics and new Keynesian economics.
economics. Yes,
And post-Keynesian economics is much more faithful to Keynes's own principle of effective demand. Right? But then post-Keynesian economics is not really taught in most
institutions.
undergraduate or
Yeah,
postgraduate curriculum.
yes.
So then one has to really try to, I mean, expose yourself to that. And here I think, uh, I could recommend a book which is Mark Lavoie's Foundations of Post-Keynesian Economics,
Okay,
Lavoie, Mark Lavoie.
lava.
I think
Okay.
that it's a good book that one can look at.
Okay. Yes, sir. And but I mean, this question, right? I mean, most students. I mean, econometrics is in stark contrast to Keynes's idea of what should aid it. I mean, so this is conflicting to me. Uh, but most people just unassumingly, or rather, in their state of non-interest, they just think that this is the entire orthodoxy. I mean, uh, if a syllabus is largely Keynesian and it is aided by econometrics, isn't it slightly contradictory? and Keynes disapproving of it?
Yeah. So I think we need to make a distinction between certainly Keynes and Keynesian.
Hmm.
Right now, when we talk of Keynesian, the most important kind of thing, at least for me, is the principle of effective demand. Now, Keynes's views on many matters, some of which I might agree with, some of which I might not agree with. And let me
Yes.
just give you one example of something that Keynes does, which I don't agree with. In his general theory, he sort of, the way in which he talks of classical economics is to treat everybody before him as a classical economist.
Hmm.
So including, I mean, so he would put his, Marshall, Pigou, Smith, Ricardo, everyone as a classical economist.
Hmm.
Now, this is a very poor definition,
Of yeah.
right? Because it's not, I mean, you cannot define something, I mean, if it is appropriate, maybe, but it's not a chronological definition, right? Classical political economy has some analytical features which are fundamentally different from marginalist economics,
Yes.
right? And so there's no way in which you can say the economics of Smith and Ricardo are the same as the economics of Marshall and Pigou.
Absolutely. Yes.
And then he puts all of it together.
Hmm.
So then the question is, do you want to go with Keynes's definition or not? And my response is not to go with that.
Yeah.
So similarly, he has views on econometrics. Now, I think there are valuable insights to econometrics in his views. We may agree or we may disagree.
Okay. Yes. Sir. Interesting. But I think we can both agree that it is contradictory as a student of economics that you teach econometrics and you also support Keynes, but the story of economics is such that Keynes disapproved of econometrics. And
True, true.
yes. So the other thing is, right now, what is the rate of change of acceptance of heterodox thinking in India as compared to any other place in the world? Any other continent? I mean, not continent or country or any other, I mean, not region, but compared to what is the rate of acceptance, and where do you think the rate of acceptance would increase, decrease? What do you think is the current sort of trajectory?
I think that often ideas, we go in cycles of some form. It's not that it's uniform cycles.
Yes.
There was a point of time in which history of economic thought was very popular. Everybody wanted to study it. There have been periods of time when nobody wants to study it. Maybe there is some excitement now about history of economic thought. There's been some excitement about behavioral economics, but now it's died down. People are
Yes.
excited about RCTs. So I think that it keeps really changing depending on the demographic, depending on the people involved, depending on the community. And I think as students, we are, I mean, any student is always looking for different ideas, ideas that often wrestle with each other,
Hmm.
ideas that are often contradictory to each other, because
Hmm.
I think that's where learning happens.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not really about, whether, I mean, as a teacher at least,
Hmm.
and this is what I've done in my macroeconomics textbook too,
Hmm.
is that I want to teach students mainstream and also the alternative.
Yes.
I have a position, but I want them to learn both
Both.
and to sort of figure out why they might choose one paradigm over the other.
Or the other. Okay.
Right? And I think it is in this process of juxtaposition
Hmm.
um, that we get to know more about both these paradigms.
Hmm. True, sir. True, true, true. And I think to end our session, most people, I think, as part of my personal observation, I mean, from whatever I've seen, most people choose economics either because they want to crack UPSC, or because they didn't get any other good course, or because they want to end up as a consultant in some generic, what do you call that? The high players of the high paying and the high players of the world. But this raises a sort of model question of and the sort of and the curriculum and the syllabus is also structured in this manner, and the ones who excel at it choose this path. Either that, or they do a PhD, and then they're involved in some kind of minor research. But for the ones who truly find themselves in equilibrium with the subject, isn't the entire sort of playing ground slightly unfair for us to experience all of this and to see how this thing is slightly skewed in their favor? The ones who are not sincere. Yeah.
Yeah, so I see what you are saying, and I think maybe you have a point, and which is why I really believe that, of course, there's limited time in any course,
Yes.
any program,
Yes.
but the curriculum has to be sufficiently open and open-ended. Open-ended
Yes.
in this sense that the student should certainly know that there are different schools of thought, in terms of theoretical sense. Students should know a little bit of economic history of the discipline.
Yes.
Something about the local Indian context.
Yes.
And, if you are in Tamil Nadu, a little bit about the Tamil Nadu economy.
Yes.
So I think these are all absolutely important. Then you can have electives, which might, and of course, you need to now, because of the fact that most of mainstream economics, or most of economics, there's a lot of literature which is empirical using econometrics, then one has to learn econometrics too. Right? So, because it is not necessarily to produce research, but often to read what others are writing and to communicate, it becomes so. Then some are what I would think is important to have in the curriculum. And then we can have elective courses fueling our interests. But if a curriculum does not expose you to different schools of thought, if a curriculum does not introduce you to, I think, economic history and history of economic thought, I think there is a problem there, and I think that it's fair to the, to the discipline, to the idea of economics itself.
True. And for those that find themselves, that want to sort of go beyond the consultancy route, any advice you would give to them to end on that note?
Yeah, so I think that it's important to read good books. And I think that it is important to, and when I say, because I think it's important to read books because it is about engaging with the theme or topic over 250, 300 words, which often gives a kind of, a more holistic perspective. And because I think today we are often reading very little, but we are reading a lot, but each piece might be very short.
Short, yes.
Right? Whether it is on social media or a little more longer pieces. So our attention spans are short. We are looking at small pieces of information. So I would think that it is important that we train our brains to, read longer analysis of the economy. And I'm saying, more than 200 pages. And I think that which speak to you. I think that's what is important. And often books. So, if you were to ask me, my advice would be to read more of books that speaks to you, that you find yourself in agreement with.
Yes.
And read books which you absolutely disagree with.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Because it's very easy to get into a bubble. So I think that we need to constantly, be engaged with ideas, which are also challenging us.
Yes. Nice. Well, thank you so much, sir, for appearing on this podcast. I think I had a lovely session with you personally, and I hope to see you sometime next. But